The night air outside the diner was damp with drizzle, the neon sign above buzzing faintly, casting pale light over the cracked pavement. Inside, the hum of clattering dishes and low chatter carried across the nearly empty space. It was almost midnight, and yet, for Elena Rivera, the shift wasn't over. Her white apron was smudged with coffee stains, her hands red from scrubbing tables, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion. She was 22, a college dropout forced into double shifts just to pay off her mother's hospital bills. Each night blurred into the next, her dreams shrinking smaller with every plate she balanced, every order she scribbled down. But tonight was different. The bell above the diner door jingled, sharp and commanding, cutting through the stale air. Elena glanced up and froze. 3 men walked in, the kind of men who carried storms with them. Black suits, broad shoulders, polished shoes that didn't belong on cracked diner tiles. The first 2 scanned the room like predators marking territory, but it was the third man who drew every breath out of her lungs. Tall, powerful, his presence filled the diner before he even sat down. Midnight hair slicked back, sharp jawline, dark eyes that held no warmth. His tailored suit was worth more than her yearly wage. The silver watch on his wrist caught the light, but it wasn't the luxury that made her chest tighten. It was the way everyone else in the diner went still, hushed, as though his very existence demanded silence. Marco Romano, even Elena, who never cared for the whispers of the city's underworld, recognized him. The name was inked in every headline that spoke of power, fear, and blood. Mafia boss, dangerous, untouchable. And he was sitting in her section. Her legs trembled as she picked up her notepad and pen, forcing a professional smile. Just another customer, she told herself. Keep your head down. Don't give him a reason to notice you. Good evening. Her voice wavered as she approached. What can I get you tonight? Marco's gaze lifted slowly, pinning her in place. His eyes were dark, fathomless, studying her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. Coffee. His voice was smooth, deep, with an edge that carried command. Black. She nodded quickly, scribbling the order though her mind screamed, "Don't mess this up." At the counter, she poured the coffee with unsteady hands, gripping the cup tighter than necessary. She told herself she could handle this, just 1 cup of coffee. She could survive that. But as she turned back toward his table, fate betrayed her. A loose shoelace caught under her sneaker. Her balance faltered. The cup tilted, and in one horrifying slow-motion instant, scalding black coffee splashed across Marco Romano's pristine suit. The entire diner gasped. One of his men leapt up, reaching for her as though ready to drag her away. Elena froze, her breath trapped in her chest. Heat rose to her face, tears pricking her eyes. She stumbled back, words tumbling from her mouth in desperation. I'm so sorry. Please, it was an accident, I didn't mean... The silence was suffocating. Marco didn't move at first. He looked down at the spreading stain on his suit, then lifted his gaze to her again. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone. But there was something in his eyes now. Not rage, not disgust. Something far more dangerous, interest. Elena's pulse hammered in her ears. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet stayed rooted, trapped in his stare. Finally, Marco lifted a hand, and his men stopped instantly, awaiting his command. He leaned back in his chair, lips curling into the faintest shadow of a smile. "What's your name?" he asked softly, almost too calm. Elena, she whispered, her voice breaking. Elena, he repeated, savoring it, as though the syllables tasted foreign and intriguing on his tongue. He studied her one last time before standing, adjusting his suit jacket with unnerving composure. "You'll see me again." And without another word, he walked out into the night, his men following like shadows. Elena sank against the counter, trembling. She didn't know whether she'd just narrowly escaped death or stepped into something far worse, because she didn't yet understand. The coffee stain on his suit had sealed her fate. The morning sun streamed weakly through the thin curtains of Elena's tiny apartment. The city outside was already awake, cars honking, vendors shouting, footsteps echoing against wet pavement. Inside, her alarm buzzed on the nightstand, dragging her from restless sleep. Elena groaned, pressing her face into the pillow. Her body ached from another late shift, and her mind replayed the memory of last night like a cruel loop. The coffee. The Mafia boss, his eyes. His words, "You'll see me again." She shook her head, forcing herself upright. It had just been a scare, she told herself. Men like Marco Romano had bigger concerns than a clumsy waitress. Surely by now he had forgotten her, already buried under deals and enemies far deadlier than spilled coffee. She repeated that lie to herself as she brushed her hair, as she slipped into her faded uniform, as she grabbed her bag and headed for the door. But when she opened it, 2 men in black suits stood in the hallway. Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. They were the same men from the diner, their presence as heavy as shadows. One was broad with a scar down his cheek. The other wore sunglasses despite the dim corridor, his jaw set like stone. "Elena Rivera?" the scarred man asked, though his tone made it clear it wasn't a question. Her fingers tightened on the strap of her bag. I'm on my way to work. Excuse me." She tried to step past them, but the man with sunglasses blocked her path, his arm extending like a gate. "You won't be late for work," the scarred one said. "Mr. Romano is expecting you." Elena's stomach dropped. The hallway seemed to shrink, her pulse pounding in her ears. "What? No, I can't. Please tell him it was a mistake. I didn't mean—" "You'll tell him yourself," Sunglasses interrupted, his voice flat. Before she could protest again, the scarred man gently but firmly took her elbow. Not rough, not violent, but unyielding, like iron wrapped in velvet. Her knees trembled as they guided her down the stairs, out into the street where a sleek black car waited at the curb. Its tinted windows reflected her wide, frightened eyes. Elena's heart raced. Neighbors passed by, glancing curiously, but no one intervened. Who would dare? These men carried danger like a second skin. The car door opened, and she was ushered inside. The leather seats swallowed her, the smell of expensive cologne and smoke lingering in the air. The doors shut with a final click that echoed in her bones. The city blurred past the windows as the car moved, every turn taking her farther from the life she knew. Elena's hands shook in her lap. "Where are you taking me?" she whispered. Neither man answered. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, until finally the car slowed. Through the glass, she saw towering iron gates swing open, revealing a long drive lined with cypress trees. At the end stood a mansion, sprawling, imposing, its stone facade like something torn from another century. The car rolled to a stop before the grand entrance. One of the men opened her door, waiting. Elena's legs felt weak as she stepped out, craning her neck at the sheer size of the place. It wasn't just a home. It was a fortress. The massive double doors opened before she could even knock. Inside, chandeliers glittered, marble floors gleamed, and guards lingered in every corner, their gazes sharp. And then she saw him. Marco Romano stood at the base of the staircase, no trace of last night's coffee stain on his crisp black suit. He looked untouchable, a king in his castle, his dark eyes locking onto her instantly. Every instinct told her to run, but her body betrayed her, rooted to the floor under his gaze. "Miss Rivera," Marco said smoothly, his lips curving into the faintest smile. "I told you we'd see each other again." Her throat went dry. Why am I here?" He stepped closer, each stride deliberate, measured. The air between them seemed to thin. "Because accidents," he said softly, "have consequences." Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't know yet whether he meant punishment or something far more dangerous. The echo of Elena's footsteps bounced against polished marble as the heavy doors closed behind her. She stood frozen in the grand foyer, surrounded by towering columns, glittering chandeliers, and walls lined with oil paintings of solemn-faced men, each bearing the same dark eyes as Marco Romano. The silence was crushing. Guards lingered in the shadows, watching without blinking. The air smelled faintly of cigars, old wood, and something sharper, metallic, that raised the hair on her arms. Marco descended the staircase with unhurried grace, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud gathering above a city. He didn't need to speak. His eyes alone kept her rooted where she stood. "Welcome," he said at last, his voice smooth but laced with an authority that left no room for argument. "To my home." Elena swallowed hard, clutching the strap of her bag. Home, she thought bitterly. This was no home. It was a gilded cage. Her gaze drifted upward, catching sight of a balcony on the second floor. The curtains stirred slightly, though no window was open. A shadow shifted there, too fast, too silent. Elena blinked, and it was gone. Marco's lips curved faintly, as though he had seen her notice. "You're safe here," he said, stepping closer. "Safer than you've ever been out there." "I didn't ask for this," Elena whispered. Her voice wavered but carried a spark of defiance. "Please, just let me go." Marco's eyes lingered on her, unreadable. "Do you think I'm the kind of man who lets accidents go unaddressed?" Her chest tightened. It was coffee, just coffee. His gaze darkened, and for a moment she thought she saw something flash in his pupils, something not entirely human. She blinked, and it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. Without another word, Marco gestured. A tall woman in a black dress appeared from a side hall, her heels clicking sharply. She was elegant, composed, her features severe. "This is Rosa," Marco said. "She will show you to your room." The words sank into Elena's stomach like lead. Rosa's eyes swept over her with faint disdain, as though she were nothing more than another burden. "Follow me," she said curtly. Elena hesitated, glancing back at Marco. He was already turning away, dismissing her as though the conversation were over. The guards remained still, their stares cold reminders that resistance was futile. With her heart hammering, Elena followed Rosa through long corridors lined with statues and closed doors. Every corner seemed to hold secrets. Some doors were locked, others guarded. Once she passed a set of double doors carved with strange symbols. A wolf's head etched in silver, gleaming under the chandelier's light. "What's in there?" Elena asked quietly. Rosa's steps faltered, just for a fraction of a second. Then she recovered, her tone clipped. "Off limits." The final stretch of hallway opened into a chamber with tall windows draped in velvet. A bed too large for one person dominated the space. Elena stepped inside cautiously, overwhelmed by the opulence. The gold trim, the silk curtains, the sheer distance from her world of cracked linoleum and diner grease. "This will be your room," Rosa said. "Meals are served on schedule. You will be summoned when Mr. Romano requires you. Until then, stay here." Elena's breath hitched. "Requires me? What does that mean?" Rosa's cold smile revealed nothing. "It means what it means." She turned sharply, leaving the door open just long enough for a guard to take position outside. Elena was alone. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. Her mind screamed at her to escape, but every sound of footsteps, every glimpse of locks and guards reminded her that the mansion was no sanctuary. It was a labyrinth designed to keep her in. Rising, she crossed to the window. Beyond the glass stretched acres of manicured gardens surrounded by high walls topped with iron spikes. The gates she'd entered through stood far in the distance, shut tight. A movement below caught her eye. In the garden, near a stone fountain, Marco stood speaking with two men. His posture was relaxed, but the men bowed their heads in deference. And then, as if sensing her, he lifted his gaze to the window. Their eyes met. Even from that distance, the weight of his stare pierced her. Elena stepped back quickly, her heart racing. She told herself it was fear. It had to be fear. But there was something else. Something she didn't want to name. In the silence of the room, the ticking of a grandfather clock filled the air. Each second dragged heavier than the last, and somewhere in the mansion, behind one of those locked doors, something shifted. A sound, low, guttural, almost a growl, drifted faintly down the hall. Elena froze, her skin prickling. She was no longer sure whether Marco Romano's mansion was a palace or a prison full of monsters. The evening descended over the Romano mansion like a velvet curtain, heavy and suffocating. Chandeliers glowed in every hall, their light reflecting off marble floors polished to a mirror sheen. Elena sat on the edge of her bed, twisting the hem of her uniform nervously, when the knock came. It wasn't polite. It was sharp, commanding. "Dinner?" A guard's voice barked from the other side. Her pulse quickened. She stood, smoothing her wrinkled clothes, and stepped into the hallway. 2 guards flanked her instantly, their faces expressionless as they guided her through a maze of corridors. The silence was thick. Only the echo of their footsteps filled the air. At last they stopped before a pair of carved oak doors. One guard pushed them open, revealing a dining hall that looked more like something from a forgotten castle. The table stretched endlessly, draped in pristine linen, silver cutlery gleaming beneath the soft golden light. And at the far end, waiting with a glass of wine in hand, sat Marco Romano. He rose as she entered, his black suit tailored to perfection, his dark gaze never leaving her. He gestured smoothly to the seat beside him, though there were 100 other empty chairs. "Elena," he said softly, her name rolling off his tongue like a secret. "Join me." Her feet moved before her mind caught up, carrying her to the seat at his right. The guards closed the doors behind her, sealing them in. The room felt suddenly too large, too quiet. A servant appeared, laying dishes before them: roasted lamb, rich sauces, crystal bowls of vegetables, baskets of warm bread. The aroma made Elena's stomach twist. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, but her nerves left her appetite strangled. Marco poured her a glass of wine himself, the gesture deliberate, intimate. "Eat," he commanded. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the fork. "Why am I here?" she whispered. Marco leaned back, studying her with eyes that seemed to strip away every defense she tried to build. "Because you interest me." Her throat tightened. "I don't understand." "You will." His lips curved into the faintest smile. "Tell me, Elena, do you always work double shifts, or only when desperation demands it?" Her breath caught. How does he know? How do you? "I make it my business to know things." He sipped his wine, his composure unnerving. "Your mother is ill. The bills pile higher each month, and yet you struggle alone. Why?" Anger flared in her chest, mingling with fear. "Because it's my responsibility. She's all I have." Marco's eyes softened, just for a heartbeat, before turning sharp again. "And what do you have now?" Her fork clattered against the plate. "A prison!" she snapped before she could stop herself. The air stilled. Marco set down his glass, his gaze darkening. Yet instead of fury, amusement flickered at the corners of his mouth. "Brave," he murmured. "Most people cower. You speak." "I want to leave," Elena said firmly, though her voice trembled. His smile vanished. He leaned forward, his presence swallowing the space between them. "You will leave when I decide. Not before." Her breath shuddered. The weight of his authority pressed down on her, and yet, beneath the fear, there was something else. Something magnetic. Marco noticed it too. His eyes lingered on her face, her trembling hands, the way she refused to look away even though her instincts screamed to. "Do you believe in fate, Elena?" he asked suddenly. She blinked, startled. "Fate?" He swirled his wine, watching the crimson liquid spiral. "That everything happens for a reason. Even accidents, even spilled coffee." Her heart skipped. His words carried a strange weight, as if they were not just casual musings but hints at something deeper, darker. "I believe people make choices," she said carefully, "and sometimes they regret them." Marco chuckled softly, though it held no warmth. "Perhaps." He leaned back, his gaze never releasing her. "But I do not regret meeting you." The words hung in the air, dangerous and intimate all at once. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. She pushed her plate away, appetite long gone. "What do you want from me?" For the first time, Marco did not answer immediately. His silence was deliberate, a predator circling its prey. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Everything." The single word struck her like a physical blow. Elena's breath hitched, the room spinning around her. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "I can't do this." Marco rose too, smooth and controlled, his shadow falling over her. "You already are." For a moment, neither spoke, their eyes locked in a battle neither could win. Then Marco stepped back, his composure slipping neatly back into place. Rosa will escort you to your room, he said, his tone final. The doors opened, and Rosa appeared once more. Elena fled the dining hall, her heart in chaos. But as she glanced back, she caught one last glimpse of Marco, standing in the golden glow of chandeliers, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Obsession, curiosity, or perhaps fate. The night was long, restless. Elena tossed in silk sheets that felt more like chains than comfort. Every sound in the mansion unsettled her. Footsteps in the corridor, doors creaking, the faint howl of wind through the iron gates. When she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, she dreamed of Marco's voice whispering that single word: everything. By morning, exhaustion pressed heavy on her shoulders. A knock came at her door, softer this time. When she opened it, Rosa stood waiting, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Romano requests your presence," Rosa said simply. Elena's pulse quickened. She followed, her bare footsteps muffled by Persian rugs as Rosa led her not to the dining hall, but deeper into the mansion, down a corridor lined with locked doors, past guards who bowed their heads as they passed. At the end was a heavy wooden door with iron hinges. Rosa pushed it open and gestured. "Go in." Elena hesitated, then stepped inside. The room was vast, filled wall to wall with shelves of leather-bound books and a massive desk that gleamed like polished obsidian. Tall windows cast pale morning light over papers neatly arranged in stacks. Behind the desk sat Marco, immaculate as ever, his eyes fixed on a document in front of him. He didn't look up right away, forcing her to stand in silence until he chose to acknowledge her. Finally, he set the paper aside and leaned back in his chair. "Elena," he said smoothly. "Sit." She obeyed reluctantly, perching on the edge of a chair opposite him. Her heart thudded in her chest, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "You've been wondering why you're here," Marco said, folding his hands. "Why I didn't simply forget a clumsy accident." "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Why am I here?" He studied her for a long moment, then slid a folder across the desk. "Because I own you," Elena blinked, confusion flaring. She opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were hospital bills, dozens of them, each stamped paid in full in bold red letters. Her breath caught. These are my mother's bills," she whispered. Marco nodded once. "Your mother's treatment is expensive. Beyond your reach, but not beyond mine." Her stomach twisted. You paid them?" "I did," he said calmly. "Because I wanted to. Because now, Elena, you owe me more than you can ever repay." Her chest constricted, panic clawing at her throat. "No, you can't. This isn't fair. You had no right." "I had every right," Marco cut in sharply, his voice slicing through the room like a blade. "I save lives when I choose. I destroy lives when I choose. And you belong to me now." Elena slammed the folder shut, her hands shaking. "I'm not your possession." A flicker of something, irritation, amusement, maybe both, crossed Marco's face. He rose slowly from his chair, circling the desk until he stood close enough that she could feel his presence pressing against her like heat. "You think freedom is a choice you can afford?" he murmured. "Look around you, Elena. The world doesn't care about waitresses who spill coffee. But I do. I saw you, and now I've claimed you." Her breath came fast and shallow. "Why me?" she whispered. Marco's eyes darkened. For a moment, she thought he might answer. But instead, he brushed past her question, his tone final. "You will stay here. You will obey, and in return, your mother will live." Tears pricked Elena's eyes, rage and helplessness colliding inside her chest. She wanted to scream, to run, but every word he spoke was a cage tightening around her. Marco stepped closer still, his voice low, almost intimate. "I could have punished you for what you did. Others would have. Instead, I've given you a place here, a purpose. Don't mistake mercy for weakness." The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Elena forced herself to look up, to meet his eyes despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You can control my circumstances," she said softly, fiercely. "But you'll never own me." For a heartbeat, Marco's expression faltered. A shadow crossed his features, something raw, something dangerous. Then he smiled, slow and deliberate. "We'll see," he said. Rosa reappeared at the door, as if summoned. Marco didn't look at her. His gaze remained locked on Elena. "Take her back," he ordered. As Rosa guided Elena out, Elena's legs trembled, but her resolve burned brighter. He might hold her mother's life in his hands, but she refused to let him break her spirit. Still, as the door shut behind her, she couldn't silence the truth gnawing at her chest. Her fate was no longer hers. The hours after Marco's revelation crawled by like years. Elena sat in her room, her mind spinning, replaying his words. "Your mother will live because of me." It was a bargain she never agreed to. Chains forged without her consent. Yet the cruelest part was that he was right. Without him, her mother wouldn't survive. The weight of that truth pressed on her chest until she could barely breathe. The evening fell quietly. Rosa brought a tray of food: soup, fresh bread, fruit. But Elena barely touched it. Hunger gnawed at her, but pride forced her hands still. If Marco wanted to control her, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her bend. A soft knock startled her. The door opened. Not Rosa, not a guard. Marco himself stepped inside. He leaned casually against the doorframe, a glass of dark liquor in hand. The dim light caught the sharp planes of his face, making him look carved from shadow. "You haven't eaten," he observed. Elena's chin lifted defiantly. "I'm not hungry." Marco's gaze flicked to the untouched tray. "Starvation isn't rebellion, Elena, it's weakness." Her chest tightened with anger. "Then let me go. Let me work for my mother the way I always have." He stepped closer, his presence heavy, commanding. "Your work will never be enough. That's why you're here." The air between them vibrated with tension. Elena's pulse raced, but she refused to look away. For a long moment, Marco studied her, his eyes softer than before, though no less intense. Without a word, he crossed to the tray, tore a piece of bread, and held it out to her. "Eat," he said, her lips parted, outrage burning on her tongue. But his hand remained steady, patient, unyielding. Against her will, her body betrayed her. She reached out, took the bread, and ate. Marco's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, something like satisfaction flickering across his features. "Good," he murmured. Elena glared at him, cheeks flushed. "You think kindness will make me forget what you're doing?" "I don't deal in kindness," Marco replied. "I deal in necessity, and right now, you need strength more than pride." Before she could respond, another knock interrupted. A guard entered, whispering quickly into Marco's ear. Marco's face hardened, the softness gone. He dismissed the guard with a nod, then turned back to Elena. "There's business I must attend," he said. "But before I go..." He reached into his jacket and placed something on the table beside her tray. A small white box, sealed with a red ribbon. Elena frowned. "What is this?" "Medicine," Marco said simply. "For your mother." Her heart stopped. She reached for the box with trembling fingers, recognizing the name of the drug printed on the label. It was rare, expensive, the very prescription the hospital had told her she couldn't afford anymore. Tears pricked her eyes, unbidden. She looked up at him, throat tight. Why are you giving me this?" Marco's gaze held hers steadily. "Because I can. Because I want you to remember who ensures she wakes up tomorrow." The words were cold, almost cruel, but beneath them lingered something else. Elena didn't want to admit it, but part of her chest ached with gratitude. She hated him for it. Marco turned to leave, his voice low as he reached the door. "Eat your food, Elena. Sleep well. Tomorrow will test you more than today." The door shut behind him, leaving her in silence. Elena stared at the medicine box, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. Rage burned inside her, but so did something dangerous. The flicker of hope, the whisper of relief. And that terrified her more than anything, because Marco Romano was no longer just her captor. He was becoming the one person she couldn't completely hate. The morning came with pale sunlight spilling across Elena's room. She hadn't slept much. Marco's words echoed in her mind, and the sight of that medicine box still haunted her bedside table. Gratitude warred with fury, and both left her restless. When Rosa arrived to escort her to breakfast, Elena hesitated. "Do I have to eat with him?" she asked quietly. Rosa's face softened for the first time. Mr. Romano doesn't ask. He commands. The mansion was alive that morning. Footsteps echoing through the halls, voices murmuring in languages Elena couldn't understand. At the dining hall, Marco sat at the head of the table, dressed in another immaculate suit. He didn't rise when she entered, just gestured to the seat beside him. Elena obeyed reluctantly. The spread before them was overwhelming. Eggs, fruit, bread, cheeses, more than she'd ever seen on one table. Marco sipped his coffee, his eyes flicking to her. Eat, you'll need your strength today. Something in his tone made her pause. Why? Instead of answering, Marco gave a small smile, unreadable as ever. After breakfast, Rosa returned. Come, there's something you should see. Elena frowned. Another lecture? Rosa shook her head, almost amused. Not from me. They walked down unfamiliar corridors, away from the heart of the mansion. The air grew cooler, the walls older, lined with faded paintings. At the end of the passage, Rosa stopped before a pair of heavy iron doors. Mr. Romano told me to show you this. But Rosa's eyes darkened. Only this once. Don't come back here alone. The warning sent a shiver through Elena, but curiosity tugged harder. Rosa pushed open the doors and sunlight poured in. Elena gasped. Beyond the doors lay a hidden garden, walled in by stone and overgrown with wild, ancient beauty. Roses climbed trellises, their petals blood-red. Trees arched high, their leaves whispering secrets. At the center was a fountain, its waters glittering in the morning light. But what truly stole her breath were the statues. Dozens of them scattered across the garden. Men and women frozen in lifelike poses, fear etched on some faces, serenity on others. They looked almost real. Too real. Elena stepped closer to one statue, her hand hovering above the stone. The detail was exquisite, down to the curve of the lips, the fear in the eyes. Who made these? She whispered. Rosa's expression tightened. No one carves them. Elena turned sharply. What do you mean? Rosa's lips pressed into a thin line. Some questions are dangerous, Miss Elena. The master wants you to see this place, not understand it. Unease prickled Elena's skin. She moved through the garden slowly, each statue watching her with silent eyes. She couldn't shake the feeling that they had once been alive. At the fountain, she crouched to trail her fingers in the water. It was strangely cold, colder than ice despite the sun above. When she pulled her hand back, droplets clung to her skin, shimmering faintly like silver. Her heart pounded. Something about this place was wrong. Beautiful, yes, but wrong. A shadow fell across her. She turned to see Marco standing at the garden's entrance, his gaze fixed on her. You weren't supposed to touch the water, he said softly. Elena's chest tightened. What is this place? Marco stepped closer, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. A sanctuary. A curse. Both. She searched his face, trying to decipher the riddle. The statues. They look alive. His jaw clenched. For a moment, she thought he might tell her everything, the secret that pulsed in the air like a heartbeat. Instead, he leaned down, his voice brushing her ear. Curiosity, Elena, is dangerous. This garden doesn't forgive trespass. Her breath caught, fear and defiance colliding. Then why bring me here? Marco's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Because sooner or later you'll need to know what happens to those who disobey me. The words struck like a blow. Elena looked again at the statues, their stone eyes pleading silently, and horror twisted in her gut. Was this a warning? A promise? Marco offered his hand. Come, enough for today. Elena hesitated, staring at his hand, then at the shimmering water, then at his cold, commanding gaze. She didn't take it. She stood on her own, lifting her chin high. For a fleeting second, Marco's smile faltered, replaced by something darker, almost pained. Then it was gone, and he turned away, leading her back through the iron doors. As they closed behind her, Elena knew one thing with chilling certainty. This mansion wasn't just a prison. It was alive with secrets, and one day, those secrets would demand their price. The mansion hummed with unusual energy that evening. Servants rushed through the halls with trays of silverware, candelabras, and cases of wine older than Elena herself. Music drifted faintly from the ballroom, strings rehearsing intense harmony. Elena watched from her window as sleek black cars rolled up the gravel drive, one after another. Men in tailored suits stepped out, women draped in diamonds that sparkled like captured stars. Their laughter echoed through the night, but beneath it lay something sharp, dangerous. When Rosa entered with a gown draped over her arms, Elena stiffened. "What's this?" Elena asked. Rosa's eyes flicked to the gown. Crimson silk, slit high, the kind of dress that burned against modesty. "The master requests your presence at tonight's gathering." Elena's pulse stumbled. Requests or demands? Rosa's silence was answer enough. Elena touched the gown, the fabric smooth and heavy in her hands. "I don't belong at his parties." Rosa's expression softened briefly. No one truly belongs at Marco Romano's parties, but refusing isn't an option. Hours later, Elena stood before the mirror, the gown molding to her like molten fire. Her hair had been swept into loose curls, her lips painted the same deep red as the dress. She barely recognized herself. A waitress turned into a queen against her will. When Marco appeared at her door, his gaze lingered. For the first time, a crack appeared in his polished armor. His eyes darkened. Not with control, but with something else entirely. "You clean up well," he murmured. Elena's cheeks flushed, though anger steadied her voice. "I'm not your trophy," he smirked, offering his arm. "Tonight you are." The ballroom glittered under golden chandeliers. Music swelled, and the air buzzed with perfume and power. Elena's entrance at Marco's side drew every eye. Conversations paused. Laughter dimmed. The weight of strangers' stares pressed on her, sharp as knives. Whispers followed in her wake. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why is she with him? Marco guided her through the crowd, his hand warm against her back, a silent reminder that escape was impossible. He introduced her to no one, offering no explanation. That silence only made the intrigue grow. At the edge of the room, Elena caught sight of a man watching her. Tall, pale, his eyes unnaturally bright under the chandelier's glow. He lifted his glass to her in a mocking toast, lips curling into a smile that revealed the faintest flash of sharp teeth. Elena's stomach tightened. She turned to Marco. "Who are these people?" Marco's jaw clenched. Associates, allies, enemies, sometimes all at once. Before she could question further, a woman swept toward them. Elegant, raven-haired, draped in black silk, her eyes flicked to Elena with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. "So this is the girl," the woman said smoothly. "The one who doesn't belong." Elena froze. Marco's expression hardened. "Careful, Lucia." The woman laughed, a sound too sharp to be genuine. "I only wonder how long she'll last before the house eats her alive." Elena's skin prickled. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but Marco's grip tightened on her hand, a silent command to stay quiet. As the night wore on, Elena felt the walls closing in. The music grew darker, the laughter sharper. Shadows seemed to move where no shadows should be. More than once she swore she saw eyes glinting in corners, too bright, too feral. When she excused herself and slipped onto the balcony, the cool night air hit her like salvation. She leaned against the railing, dragging in desperate breaths. But she wasn't alone. The pale man from earlier stepped into the moonlight, his smile curling wider. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "This world isn't meant for mortals." Elena's heart hammered. "Mortals?" His grin widened, teeth catching the moonlight. "Ah, he hasn't told you yet." Before she could demand answers, Marco appeared. His presence shifted the air itself, commanding, "Dangerous." "Step away from her," Marco ordered, his voice like thunder. The pale man chuckled but obeyed, retreating into the shadows. "Careful, Romano. Secrets rot when kept too long." Marco's eyes burned as he turned back to Elena. For a moment, he looked less like a man, and more like something barely contained in human skin. Elena whispered, voice trembling. What are you?" His silence was deafening. Elena could still feel the pale man's words clinging to her skin like frost. "Mortals. Secrets rot when kept too long. They echoed with a weight she didn't understand. But Marco's silence after her whispered question, "What are you?" terrified her more than any answer could. The ballroom music still throbbed faintly behind them, but out here on the balcony, it was just the two of them. The night stretched endless, heavy with moonlight. Marco's jaw was rigid, his hands curled tight at his sides. "Go inside," he ordered, voice low, dangerous. Elena didn't move. "Not until you tell me the truth." His eyes flared, not with anger, but with something darker. "You don't want the truth." Her chin lifted, defiance steadying her trembling voice. "I deserve it. You've taken everything from me. My freedom, my choices. The least you can give me is honesty." For a long moment, Marco just stared at her. Then he turned his gaze upward. The full moon hung high, spilling silver across his sharp features. His breathing grew heavier, slower. "Elena," he said softly, almost pleading. "Go now." Her heart thudded in her chest. Fear clawed at her, but something rooted her to the spot. Why? What happens when the moon is full? Then she saw it. His hand, gripping the railing, tightened, and claws, black and sharp, pushed through his fingertips. His eyes glowed faintly gold, catching the moonlight. His chest heaved as a growl rumbled low in his throat. Elena stumbled back, her voice a whisper. "No." Marco staggered, one hand pressed against the wall as his body convulsed. His suit strained against muscles that seemed to ripple and shift beneath his skin. Bones cracked, reshaped. His growl deepened, animalistic, echoing in the night. "Run," he snarled, his voice breaking into something half human, half beast. But Elena couldn't move. Horror rooted her feet as she watched him transform piece by piece. His jaw elongated, teeth lengthening into fangs. His eyes blazed like molten gold. Fur broke through his skin, dark and coarse, spreading across his arms, his neck. The man she'd feared, resented, and begun, against her will, to understand was gone. In his place stood something monstrous, a werewolf. The balcony railing snapped under his grip, metal shrieking as though it were paper. He threw his head back and let out a guttural snarl that vibrated through Elena's bones. At last, instinct jolted her. She turned and bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before she reached it. Not by Marco's hand. The pale man from the ballroom stood there, smiling cruelly. "Ah, there he is!" The beast unveiled. Elena froze between them, the pale man blocking her path, Marco's monstrous form looming behind. Marco growled, a sound so primal it shook the floor beneath her. He lunged forward, placing himself between Elena and the intruder, claws bared. The pale man laughed. "Still protecting her? How charming!" Elena pressed against the wall, terror and disbelief colliding. Marco's body trembled with restrained violence, his beastly form coiled to strike. The pale man's eyes glowed unnaturally. "You can't hide her forever, Romano. Sooner or later, the curse consumes everything you touch." Marco roared, the sound so loud Elena clapped her hands over her ears. The pale man only chuckled before slipping back into the ballroom shadows, vanishing as quickly as he appeared. Elena's breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. Her gaze darted to Marco, the monster still standing before her, chest heaving, eyes blazing. But then, he turned his head toward her. For a terrifying moment, she thought he would lunge at her, but his growl softened, pained, as though fighting an invisible war inside himself. "Elena," his voice was ragged, barely human. "Don't be afraid." Tears blurred her vision. "How can I not?" He staggered backward, pressing himself against the shadows, as if distance could protect her. His form flickered between man and beast, claws retracting, fur receding, bones cracking back into place. When at last he collapsed to his knees, sweat-soaked and trembling, the monster was gone. Only Marco remained, gasping for breath. Elena stood frozen, heart pounding so hard it hurt. He lifted his head, meeting her wide, tear-filled eyes. His face was etched with shame. "Now you know." The silence stretched between them, heavy and unbreakable. Elena's fear and fury warred with something else. Pity, even sorrow. Because in that moment, Marco Romano, the man who claimed to own her, looked more like a prisoner than she did. The silence after Marco's transformation weighed heavier than any chain. The music inside the ballroom carried on, muffled behind closed doors, as though nothing had happened, as though the world hadn't just split open on the balcony. Elena stood frozen against the wall, her breath shallow, eyes locked on the man who only moments ago had been a beast. Marco knelt on the stone floor, chest heaving, shirt torn, sweat dripping down his temples. The once impeccable Mafia boss looked broken, fragile. He dragged in a ragged breath. "Say it," her throat tightened. "Say what?" "That you hate me, that I'm a monster, that you'll never forgive me." His voice cracked, raw in a way she had never heard. Elena's pulse thundered. The words balanced on her tongue, sharp and easy. But when she looked at him, really looked, the image of the beast was tangled with the sight of his eyes just before he lost control. Eyes filled not with cruelty, but with pain. She swallowed hard. "You should have told me." Marco's head dropped, a bitter laugh escaping. "And what would you have done? Run? Scream? Sell my secret to the highest bidder? You think so little of me?" "I think too much of survival," he said, finally raising his gaze. The golden flicker still lingered in his eyes, but it was dim now, fading. "In my world, weakness is death. And this curse," his hands curled into fists, "this curse is weakness." Elena edged closer despite herself, her voice trembling. "What are you?" He hesitated, then exhaled slowly, as though releasing years of secrecy. "A man damned to walk between two worlds, neither fully human nor fully beast. Every full moon the curse takes me, and if I lose control..." His jaw tightened. "People die," the words landed like stones in Elena's chest. The statues in the garden, the whispers at the party, the pale man's taunts, pieces clicked together into a terrifying picture. "You've killed," she whispered. Marco's silence was answer enough. Tears pricked her eyes, but anger pushed through. "And yet you claim to protect me? You say I belong to you, but you can't even control yourself." His expression hardened, but not in anger, in shame. "That's why I keep people away. That's why you should have never touched that garden, never stood beside me tonight. Because one day, Elena, I won't stop myself. And when that day comes, then let me go," she snapped, her voice cracking. "Let me go before it happens." The words hung in the air like a blade. Marco rose to his feet slowly, unsteady, his suit in ruins. He stepped closer, and though Elena wanted to retreat, her back was already against the wall. His shadow fell over her, his presence suffocating, magnetic. "I can't," he said hoarsely. Her breath hitched. "Why not?" His hand lifted, hovering just inches from her cheek, trembling with restraint. "Because you are the only thing that makes me feel human. And I can't lose that. Not now." Elena's chest ached. She wanted to shove him away, to scream at him for dragging her into his darkness. But she also saw the torment carved into every line of his face. A man chained by his own body, his own blood. Her voice softened against her better judgment. "You think I can save you?" His eyes locked on hers, desperate, pleading. "You already are." For a heartbeat neither moved. The night pressed in around them, the moon casting silver across his torn figure, across her trembling hands. It felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, one step away from ruin. Then footsteps echoed from inside. Guards, approaching the balcony doors. Marco straightened instantly, his mask snapping back into place. He adjusted his ruined jacket as best he could, though his chest still heaved with exhaustion. "Elena," he said quietly, almost gently, not a word, to anyone. Before she could answer, the doors opened. 2 guards entered, their eyes flicking over Marco's disheveled form, but daring no questions. "Escort her back to her room," Marco ordered, his voice cold again. As they led Elena away, she looked back once. Marco stood alone on the balcony, staring up at the moon as though it were both his captor and his executioner. And in her heart, Elena realized the truth. She wasn't just trapped in Marco's world. She was trapped in his curse. The guards marched Elena back through the golden halls as though nothing had happened on the balcony, but her mind reeled with images she could never unsee. Claws breaking through skin, golden eyes burning like fire, the man she feared becoming the beast he could no longer cage. When they closed her bedroom door behind her, Elena collapsed onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. She wanted to scream, to tear the gown from her body, to scrub her skin until the memory of his touch, his voice, his confession, vanished. But no matter how hard she tried to cling to hatred, pity wormed its way in. She had seen Marco Romano broken, shackled to something worse than chains. He was both jailer and prisoner. That didn't mean she wanted to stay. The garden statues haunted her dreams that night, faces frozen mid-scream. In the morning, she woke with a new resolve hardening in her chest. If she stayed, she would become one of them. Not stone, but silence. Her spirit carved into obedience. She needed a way out. At breakfast, Rosa served her quietly, eyes downcast. Elena studied her, wondering if the woman knew the truth about Marco. Wondering if she had once been like Elena, trapped, indebted, helpless. When Rosa set down the tea, Elena whispered, "Rosa, do you ever dream of leaving this place?" For the briefest second, Rosa froze. Then she straightened, her mask slipping back into place. "Dreams are dangerous here, Miss Elena." But her hesitation was enough. Rosa wasn't blind. Elena leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Help me, Rosa, please. I don't belong here." Rosa's hands trembled as she gathered the tray. "If the master hears you speak like that—" "I don't care," Elena pressed. "He owns me through my mother, but I can't survive this. I won't. There has to be a way." Rosa's lips thinned, her eyes darting to the door. For a heartbeat, Elena thought she would walk away. But then Rosa whispered, so soft it was almost inaudible, "There are whispers of a key." Elena's heart lurched. "A key?" Rosa's gaze flicked sharply to her. "I've said too much." She left before Elena could demand more, the door shutting like a slammed secret. The rest of the day passed in heavy silence. Guards trailed her every move. Marco was nowhere to be seen, as though he'd vanished into the mansion's shadows. Every corner of the house seemed to lean closer, listening, warning. That night, Elena crept from her room. The halls stretched endless in darkness, flickering with candlelight. She moved quietly, her bare feet silent against the rugs. She wasn't sure where she was going, only that she needed to see the mansion differently, not as a prisoner, but as a map, a puzzle to solve. At the far end of a corridor, she found an old door slightly ajar. Inside was a study, smaller than Marco's grand library, filled with dust and forgotten ledgers. She lit a candle and scanned the shelves, heart hammering. Most books were ledgers of the Romano family's empire, dates and numbers scrawled in faded ink. But one caught her eye, its cover marked by a strange sigil that shimmered faintly in the candlelight. She opened it. Inside were sketches of the garden, the fountain, the statues, notes written in Marco's sharp hand, lines of Latin she couldn't translate. But one passage, scrawled in English, stole her breath. "The key lies where the curse began." Elena's pulse quickened. She turned more pages, finding fragments of a story, a bloodline bound to the moon, a curse of stone and shadow, a mansion built not as a home but as a cage. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked. Elena spun, clutching the candle. A figure stood in the doorway, not Marco, the pale man from the party. His smile curved slowly, like a blade. "Curiosity again," he murmured. "You're braver than I thought." Elena's throat went dry. "Who are you?" He stepped into the room, his eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "A friend? Or an enemy, depends on how badly you want to leave." Her grip on the book tightened. "I want out." His smile widened. "Good. Then perhaps we can help each other." The candle flickered wildly, and for the first time, Elena realized escape might be possible, but at a cost she wasn't ready to name. The study's air was thick with dust, candle smoke, and something darker, the pale man's presence. His smile never faltered, sharp and deliberate, as though carved from the same stone that haunted the garden. Elena clutched the strange book to her chest. "If you want to help me, tell me who you are." The man chuckled, low and mocking. "Names are dangerous here, but if you insist—" He gave a half bow, his pale hair catching the candlelight. "Call me Lucian." The name slithered over her skin like ice. "What do you want from me?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. Lucian tilted his head, studying her. I want what Marco has kept hidden. The curse, the key, the freedom that mansion denies. His smile thinned. And you, Elena, may be the crack in his armor. Her heart raced. He knew her name. Of course he did. Everyone in this cursed house seemed to know more about her than she knew about herself. Lucian circled her slowly, like a predator amused by its prey. You dream of escape, don't you? Of tearing free from Marco's gilded chains? I can give you that. Elena's voice hardened. And why should I trust you? You're like him. A monster. Lucian's laughter was soft, but sharp enough to cut. Ah, but there's a difference. Marco hides what he is, shrouds himself in power and fear. I embrace it. He leaned closer, his breath cold against her ear. At least with me, you'd never wonder where you stand. The words unsettled her. Not because they were comforting, but because they rang with twisted truth. Elena pulled back, clutching the book tighter. If you want something, say it plainly. Lucian's eyes gleamed. The key. Find it for me. Bring it to me. And in return, I'll give you what you want most. Her lips parted. My freedom? Lucian's smile stretched. Your freedom. Your mother's safety. A life untouched by Romano blood. Elena's throat tightened. It was everything she had prayed for. Everything Marco had stolen. But she had seen enough of devils to know their bargains were never without cost. What happens to Marco? She asked carefully. If I give you this key. Lucian's silence was more dangerous than words. His smile faded, his eyes burning with something darker than fire. He will no longer be your captor, Lucian said at last. That should be enough. A shiver traced her spine. She wasn't naive. Whatever Lucian planned, it wasn't mercy. She forced her voice steady. Why me? Why not take the key yourself? Lucian's jaw tightened, a crack in his polished mask. Because only the innocent can touch it. The cursed are bound. Do you understand now? Her chest rose and fell, her heart pounding. He needed her. That gave her power, but also made her a pawn. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Heavy, familiar. Marco. Lucian's smile returned, sharp and cruel. Think carefully, little waitress. Your chains may come in silk, but chains they remain. When you're ready to trade them for wings, find me. In a swirl of shadows, he slipped through a side door, vanishing as though he had never been there. Elena barely had time to hide the book beneath her gown, before the study door burst open. Marco stood there, his face storm-dark, eyes flickering dangerously. He scanned the room, the candle, the scattered ledgers, then fixed his gaze on her. What are you doing here? His voice was a whip. Elena's breath caught, but she lifted her chin. Reading. You can't forbid me from that. Marco stepped closer, his presence swallowing the room. His gaze raked over her face, searching for lies. Stay out of this study. There are things here that would destroy you. Her grip on the hidden book tightened. Maybe those things could also save me, she thought. Marco's hand brushed her arm. A warning. A claim. I won't say it again, Elena. Stay away. Then he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. Alone once more, Elena sank against the desk, trembling. Between Marco's warning and Lucian's bargain, she felt the walls closing in. But one truth remained clear in her heart. If freedom meant siding with the enemy, she might just take the risk. The night pressed heavy against the windows, moonlight spilling through the curtains in silver ribbons. Elena lay awake, heart pounding with every tick of the clock. Sleep was impossible. Lucian's words echoed in her mind. The key lies where the curse began. She couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. When the mansion had finally gone quiet, guards settling into their posts, footsteps fading into silence, Elena slipped from her bed. She padded barefoot across the marble floor, her pulse thrumming like a drum. The corridors seemed alive in the dark. Every shadow threatened to reveal Marco. Every creak of the old walls whispered warnings. But the weight of the hidden book under her arm kept her moving. She wasn't just a prisoner tonight. She was a thief of secrets. At the far end of the western wing, she found a staircase she hadn't noticed before. Narrow, half-hidden behind a heavy curtain, it spiraled downward into the heart of the mansion. Dust clung to the banister, as though no one had touched it in years. The air grew colder as she descended. The staircase opened into a long corridor, lit only by shafts of moonlight cutting through cracked windows. The walls were lined with portraits. The Romano bloodline, stern-faced men, and sorrow-eyed women. Each pair of eyes seemed to follow her, silently accusing her trespass. At the corridor's end, a pair of carved oak doors loomed, their surface etched with the same sigil that marked the book. Elena's fingers trembled as she pushed them open. Inside was a forgotten chapel. Moonlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the cracked stone floor in red and blue. The altar at the front was draped in black cloth, dust thick upon it. Candles, long extinguished, stood like silent sentinels. But it was the mural behind the altar that stole her breath. A great wolf, crowned in shadow, howled toward a blood-red moon. Around it, figures knelt in chains, their faces twisted in agony. And at the wolf's feet, a single white rose wilting under its paw. Elena's throat tightened. This wasn't just art, this was history. She moved closer, tracing the faded paint with her eyes. At the bottom of the mural, faint words were carved in Latin. She couldn't read them, but the shapes of the letters matched passages from Marco's book. The key lies where the curse began. Her gaze fell to the altar. Its surface bore scratches, deep grooves that looked less like time's erosion and more like claw marks. Heart hammering, Elena set the book down and pressed her hands to the altar's edge. Slowly she pushed. The stone shifted with a grinding groan, revealing a hollow beneath. Inside lay a silver locket. It gleamed in the moonlight, untouched by dust or decay. As though it had been waiting for her, Elena lifted it, her fingers trembling. The metal was cold, unnaturally so. When she opened it, she found two things: a miniature painting of a woman with raven-black hair, and a tiny key, delicate and sharp, hidden inside the frame. The air thickened. For a moment, the silence of the chapel grew unbearable, like a storm gathering in stillness. Elena. Her blood froze. The voice came from behind her, deep, low, threaded with restrained fury. She turned slowly. Marco stood in the doorway, moonlight cutting across his face. His golden eyes burned in the dark, his expression unreadable. Part rage, part pain. The locket shook in her hands. "I told you," he said, stepping into the room, his voice dangerously calm, "to stay away from this wing." Elena forced herself to meet his gaze. "What is this place? What curse are you hiding?" Marco's jaw clenched. "You don't understand what you've touched." "Then make me understand," she snapped, her fear drowned by defiance. "You've stolen my freedom, my life. The least you owe me is the truth." His eyes flared brighter, and for a moment she thought he would lunge, tear the locket from her hands, silence her with violence. Instead, he stopped inches from her, his breath ragged. "That locket belonged to my mother," he said, voice raw, "and the key inside it can end us all." Elena's breath caught. And the curse? His silence was her answer. And in that silence, Elena realized something terrifying. Marco wasn't protecting her from Lucien. He was protecting himself from the very freedom she craved. The silver locket lay heavy in Elena's palm, the tiny key glinting like a forbidden promise. Marco's golden eyes locked on it, his chest rising and falling with barely contained fury. For a long, brittle moment, neither of them spoke. Only the moonlight dared to move, sliding across the cracked chapel floor. Finally, Marco exhaled, a sound between a sigh and a growl. He turned away, his shoulders rigid, as though even facing her cost him. "You shouldn't have found this," he said, voice low. "It was meant to stay buried." Elena's fists clenched, buried like the truth. "Like the lives you've ruined to protect your secrets?" Marco spun back, his eyes burning. "You think I wanted this curse? That I enjoyed chaining myself in shadows every full moon? Elena, everything I've built, this mansion, this empire, it isn't power. It's a prison." The words struck her like stones. He sounded less like a tyrant, more like a man condemned. Still, she refused to soften. "Then tell me what chains you. Tell me why this curse began." His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he would refuse, but then slowly he sank onto one of the chapel's pews, shadows folding around him like a cloak. "It began with my mother," he said. "She wasn't born a Romano. She was a healer, a woman of light. My father, Don Romano before me, took her as his bride, but he never earned her love. She belonged to another, a man cursed by the moon, when she chose my father's wealth over him. That man cursed our bloodline in his grief and rage. Every son born of Romano blood would bear the wolf within." His hands flexed, claws threatening beneath his skin. He forced them still. "My mother tried to save me. She wore that locket, prayed to it, bled for it. She found the key, but she died before she could use it." His voice cracked on the last word, barely audible. Elena's throat tightened. She looked at the tiny key in the locket, then back at Marco. "And you've been trapped ever since." His laugh was hollow. "Trapped? No. Condemned. Do you know what it means to smell every heartbeat around you? To hunger for flesh when the moon rises? Do you know what it means to kill those you swore to protect?" His eyes dropped, and for a heartbeat, Elena saw not the ruthless Mafia boss, not the beast, but a boy who had once begged his mother to save him. Her voice softened despite herself. "You've killed." Marco's silence was enough. His fists trembled on his knees. "Every full moon is a battle. Sometimes I win, sometimes I don't." The chapel seemed colder, the air thick with ghosts. Elena sat across from him, the locket clutched tightly. "If this key can end it, why keep it hidden? Why let your curse consume you?" Marco's head lifted, his eyes blazing. "Because ending it means ending me. The curse binds my blood, Elena. To break it, the line must break with it." Her breath caught. "You'd die." He nodded once, sharp and final. "And if I die, this empire crumbles. Thousands of people who depend on my protection are left to vultures like Lucian. Do you understand now? My curse isn't mine alone. It's theirs. And yours." Elena's heart twisted painfully. She wanted to scream at him for his arrogance, for chaining her to his fate. But part of her saw the truth in his words. He carried the weight of more than himself. Yet the thought of her mother, lying frail and breathless in a hospital bed, seared through her. Freedom still shimmered in the little silver key. "You're asking me," she whispered, "to choose your survival over mine." Marco's eyes locked on hers, raw and unguarded. "I'm asking you to see me, not as your captor, not as your monster, but as a man who has no choice." Silence stretched between them, fragile as glass. Elena clutched the locket, her pulse a drumbeat of defiance and doubt. For the first time, she wasn't sure if Marco, Romano, was her enemy, or the only soul in this cursed mansion who understood her, suffering. And that made him even more dangerous. The locket's silver burned, cold in Elena's hand as she left the chapel, Marco's confession echoing in her chest. His words tangled her thoughts like thorned vines. To break the curse, the line must break with it. She couldn't stop hearing it, couldn't stop imagining it. The key was freedom, but at the price of Marco's life. Her footsteps carried her back toward her chambers, but before she reached the staircase, a whisper sliced through the silence. "Elena." Her breath caught. The voice was velvet and smoke. From the shadows of a side hall, Lucian emerged, as if he had been waiting. His pale hair gleamed in the dim light, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "You found it," he said softly. "The locket, the key." Elena froze. She clutched the silver tighter against her chest. "How do you know?" Lucian chuckled, stepping closer. "Because the air is shifted. The curse trembles when its undoing is near. Marco's leash on you is loosening." His gaze flicked to your trembling hands, and you're holding the blade that could cut it. Elena's voice cracked with suspicion. "You told me to find it, but you didn't tell me the cost." Lucian's smile sharpened. "Ah, so he's confessed. Of course he would. Always the martyr. Always pretending his death is a sacrifice for the world." He circled her slowly, his presence heavy and intoxicating. "Don't let him fool you. His empire thrives on blood, on chains. Ending him isn't doom, Elena. It's salvation." Her pulse thundered in her ears. She thought of the statues in the garden, the faces frozen in terror. She thought of Rosa, silent and weary. She thought of her mother, wasting away in a hospital bed. Freedom glittered just within reach. Lucian leaned close, his breath cold against her ear. "Give me the key, and I will ensure your mother lives, free of Marco's bargain. You will walk out of this mansion, never hunted, never haunted. Safe." Her chest tightened painfully. It was the dream she had clung to through every sleepless night. But Marco's face rose in her mind. Not the beast, not the tyrant, but the broken man in the chapel, confessing his curse with rawness she hadn't expected. Elena stepped back, voice trembling. "And what happens to everyone else if Marco dies?" Lucian's smile faltered, just for an instant, before returning sharper. "Why should you care? Were they there when you scrubbed dishes to pay hospital bills? Did they save you when Marco chained you here? You owe them nothing." The words sank deep, cruel and tempting, but her heart rebelled. She did care, too much. That was her curse. "I can't trust you," she whispered. Lucian's eyes hardened. The air around him darkened, the shadows stretching like claws. "You think you have a choice, little bird? Marco will never free you. Not truly. With every breath you take in this house, you belong to him." Elena's grip on the locket tightened until the metal bit into her skin. "Then maybe I'll belong to no one." For the first time, Lucian's calm cracked. His voice dropped into a hiss. "Careful, Elena. If you waste the chance I've given you, I'll make sure the curse doesn't just consume him. It consumes you too." The candles lining the hall flickered violently. Then, as suddenly as he'd appeared, Lucian melted back into the shadows, gone like a wraith. Elena stood trembling in the silence, the locket burning in her palm. She had choices now, but every path seemed to lead through fire. If she gave the key to Marco, she risked being chained forever in his prison of power and shadows. If she gave it to Lucian, she risked unleashing a greater monster than the one she already knew. And if she kept it for herself... Elena lifted the locket, staring at the tiny key glinting in the moonlight. For the first time, the possibility clawed at her. Maybe freedom wouldn't come from choosing between them. Maybe it would come from betraying them both. The days crawled toward the full moon, each hour thick with tension. The mansion itself seemed restless, its walls humming with anticipation, its shadows twitching as if alive. Elena felt it in her bones. Something was coming. Something terrible. On the night of the blood moon, the air turned sharp as glass. Guards doubled their patrols, candles burned low, and even Rosa whispered prayers under her breath as she moved through the halls. Elena stood at her window, the locket clutched in her hands. Above the forest, the moon rose, swollen and red, bleeding light into the sky. The key inside the silver casing seemed to thrum with power, pulsing in time with her heart. Behind her, the door opened. "Elena." She turned. Marco entered, his presence heavier than ever. His shirt clung to his chest, damp with sweat. His eyes, already glowing faintly gold, flicked to the locket. "You shouldn't be holding that tonight." His voice was hoarse, strained, as though the wolf was clawing just beneath his skin. Elena straightened, refusing to hide it. Maybe tonight is the only night it matters. He strode closer, his breath unsteady. "Listen to me. The blood moon is the strongest pull of the curse. I can control it most nights. But tonight, I will not be myself." Her stomach clenched. "Then chain yourself. Lock the doors. Don't come near me." "I can't," he rasped. His hand gripped the bedpost, claws splitting through his nails. "Lucian waits for me to fall. If I bind myself, he'll strike. And if he strikes..." The unspoken truth twisted between them. Everyone in the mansion would fall with him. A howl split the night. Not Marco's, but something outside. The walls shuddered with it, low and predatory. Elena's blood froze. "Lucian." Marco's head snapped toward the sound, his eyes blazing gold. "He's here." Before Elena could react, the windows exploded inward. Shards of glass rained across the floor as shadows bled into the room. Lucian stepped through the wreckage, tall and terrible, his pale eyes burning like frost fire. "Elena," he purred, ignoring Marco's snarl. "It's time to choose." Marco lunged, half-shifted, claws slashing, fangs bared. Lucian met him with inhuman speed, catching his arm mid-strike. The room shook with their collision, power crashing against power. "Elena, run!" Marco roared, his voice more beast than man. But her legs wouldn't move. The locket burned against her palm, the key begging to be used. Lucian shoved Marco back, his smile sharp as steel. Why waste yourself on him, Elena? Look at him. He's nothing but a chained animal. With me, you'd be free. Marco lunged again, eyes blazing, but Lucian's shadows snaked around his throat, choking him mid-snarl. Marco hit the floor hard, his claws tearing gouges into the wood as he struggled. Elena's heart pounded. She couldn't breathe. Lucian turned to her, extending a pale hand. The key. Give it to me, and I'll end this now. Her gaze flicked to Marco. His face twisted with fury and pain, but in his eyes, golden and desperate, she saw something else. Not command, not control. A plea. Elena. His voice cracked, raw, more human than she'd ever heard. Don't. Her chest heaved. 2 monsters, 2 choices, and the key between them. The moon's red light poured into the room, bathing them all in blood. The air crackled, every second tightening into inevitability. Elena lifted the locket, her hands shaking. Lucian's smile widened. Marco's eyes blazed, and for the first time, Elena realized this wasn't just about freedom. It was about who she would become once she chose. Would she be savior, betrayer, or something else entirely? The blood moon waited for her answer. The chapel of her heart thundered louder than the war outside. Marco's snarls rattled the walls. Lucian's laughter cut like broken glass, and through it all, the locket burned in Elena's hand like a living flame. The blood moon's crimson light spilled through the shattered windows, painting everything in blood. Elena, Lucian's voice lashed across the chaos, smooth and merciless. His pale hand reached for her as his shadows tightened around Marco's throat. Give me the key. 1 turn and you'll never bow to him again. Your chains will shatter. Marco choked against the darkness, claws tearing the floor as he tried to rise. His eyes, wild, gold, desperate, locked onto her. Elena, don't trust him. His voice was ragged, animal, yet achingly human. Her chest convulsed. She wanted to scream. Both men claimed to know her fate, both pulling at her, promising freedom in different cages. She looked at the key, gleaming in the locket like it knew the answer before she did. What if neither of them deserved it? What if freedom wasn't theirs to grant, but hers to take? Lucian sensed her hesitation. He stepped closer, the room darkening around him. Think of your mother, he whispered. Think of her last breath. Marco cannot save her forever. I can. Choose me. The words stabbed deep. Tears pricked her eyes. The image of her mother's frail hands, her shallow breaths, nearly broke her resolve. But then she remembered Rosa's haunted eyes, the statues in the garden, the faces of people broken beneath power. Was Lucian truly different? Or was he just the same prison? Colder, crueler, draped in promises. Her hand trembled. She lifted the locket higher. Elena. Marco's roar cracked through the night, fierce and desperate. He ripped free of Lucian's shadows in a burst of golden fire, the wolf tearing through his veins. His half-shifted body loomed, eyes blazing. If you give him that key, he'll destroy everything. Lucian laughed, tightening his grip on the shadows. Lies. He's terrified, Elena, because you finally hold the power. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Both were right. Both were wrong. And then, clarity. Her voice rose, steady, stronger than she thought possible. No. I'm done choosing between monsters. The words silenced them both. With trembling fingers, Elena pulled the tiny key free from the locket's frame. The metal gleamed in the blood moon's light, sharp, fragile, infinite. Lucian's eyes widened. Marco's chest heaved. Elena, Marco's voice broke. Don't, Lucian hissed. Do it. And Elena did. But not the way either expected. She turned and thrust the key into the altar itself, the ancient stone where she had found the locket. The grooves lit instantly, crimson light spilling outward like veins, racing through the chapel's walls. The ground shuddered. A deep, guttural howl erupted from beneath the mansion, shaking its very bones. Marco staggered back, horror and awe twisting his face. What have you done? Elena's voice was iron. I've chosen myself. The altar split open with a deafening crack, releasing a surge of silver light that clashed with the blood moon's red glow. Shadows screamed as they burned away. Lucian recoiled, his perfect mask cracking as the radiance seared his skin. No, he shrieked, fury twisting his voice. Foolish girl, you don't know what you've unleashed. Marco's claws scraped the floor as he fought against the pull of the light. His golden eyes locked on Elena, raw with fear. Not for himself, but for her. Elena, step back. But she didn't. She stood firm, clutching the empty locket as the key dissolved into pure light, spreading like wildfire through the mansion. And in that storm of shadow and flame, Elena understood. She hadn't chosen Marco or Lucian. She had chosen the truth. Whatever the curse was, whatever ending it demanded, it would no longer belong to them. It would belong to her. The mansion groaned like a wounded beast, its foundations trembling under the surge of light Elena had unleashed. Cracks splintered across the chapel walls, raining dust and stone as the altar's glow spread outward, devouring shadow and fire alike. Elena staggered but refused to fall. The empty locket dangled against her chest, its chain glowing faintly, as though it still carried the echo of the key's power. Lucian's scream cut through the chaos, a sound neither human nor beast. His skin blistered where the light touched him, shadows unraveling like smoke torn apart by the wind. You, he snarled, clutching his face as the pale frost of his aura flickered. You don't know what you've done. That key wasn't meant for you. Elena raised her chin, her hair whipping in the violent current of light. Then maybe it was time it was stolen. Marco collapsed to his knees, claws digging into the floor, his body convulsing between man and wolf. The golden fire of his eyes clashed with the silver blaze pouring from the altar, tearing through him, reshaping him. Elena. His voice was a broken growl. It's breaking me apart. Her chest twisted. She moved toward him, reaching out instinctively. The light bent toward her touch, calming its violent flares, softening against his skin. Lucian snarled, forcing himself upright despite the searing glow. Fools, both of you. That key doesn't end the curse. It unlocks it. The ground split with a deafening crack. From beneath the chapel rose a sound so ancient, so monstrous, it rattled Elena's bones. A howl, deep, endless, born of centuries of agony. The floor buckled, and from the gaping fissure surged a phantom wolf, vast as the night sky, its body made of shadow and silver flame. Its eyes, voids filled with stars, locked onto Elena, her breath caught. This wasn't Marco. This wasn't Lucian. This was the curse itself. The phantom wolf howled again, shaking the very blood moon above. Outside, the forest bowed, trees splintering under the force of its cry. Marco staggered to his feet, barely clinging to control. Elena, you've unleashed the origin, the first wolf. Lucian's laughter cracked through his pain. Yes, the beast that birthed us all. And now, little waitress, it will devour you first. The phantom's massive jaws opened, a storm of shadow and light spiraling from its maw. Elena's instincts screamed to run, but her feet rooted to the floor. The locket on her chest pulsed with heat, almost alive. Marco leapt, half-shifted, golden fire blazing across his claws. He struck the phantom's leg, but the blow passed through its smoke-like body, scattering only sparks. The beast didn't falter. "Elena!" he roared. "It's after the key's bearer. You have to— I destroyed the key!" she shouted. But as the phantom's gaze fixed on her, she realized the truth. Destroying it had only merged its power with her. She was the key now. The wolf lunged. The world slowed, every heartbeat an eternity. Elena felt the weight of the mansion, the curse, the centuries of blood and fire pressing down on her shoulders. She could run. She could scream. Instead, she lifted her hand, palm outstretched, as if daring the beast to strike. The phantom collided with her touch. Silver fire surged, exploding through the chapel, blinding in its brilliance. The wolf's roar became a cry of anguish, not rage, as its body began to fracture, shards of shadow breaking like glass under sunlight. Marco shielded his face, his golden eyes wide with awe. Lucian staggered back, horror dawning across his flawless mask. The phantom writhed, howled, and finally shattered, bursting into fragments of light that scattered into the blood-moon sky. Silence fell, heavy, absolute. Elena collapsed to her knees, trembling, her breath shallow. The locket lay cool against her chest, now nothing more than silver. Marco crawled toward her, his claws receding, his body returning to human form. Sweat streaked his face, but his eyes, still glowing faintly gold, were fixed on her with reverence. "You did it," he whispered, voice raw. "You broke the curse." But Lucian's laugh, low and broken, cut through the fragile peace. "No, she didn't." They turned. His skin smoldered, his shadows faint, but his eyes burned brighter than ever. The curse was never meant to die. It was meant to be reborn, and outside, above the ruins of the mansion, the blood moon pulsed darker, heavier, as though feeding on what had just been freed. The ruins of the chapel smoldered, its shattered stones glowing faintly under the blood moon's crimson glare. The phantom wolf was gone, but the air was heavier than ever, as if the curse itself hadn't ended, only shifted. Elena rose shakily to her feet, the cold silver of the locket pressed against her heart. The silence pressed hard, broken only by the slow, deliberate steps of Lucian. His once pristine suit hung in tatters, his skin blistered from the light, but his presence was no less terrifying. His pale eyes gleamed like twin moons. "You thought destroying the key would free you," he sneered. "But curses are not broken by defiance. They are fed by it." Marco stepped in front of Elena, his chest heaving, his shirt torn open, golden light still pulsing in his veins. "Stay away from her, Lucian." Lucian laughed, low and mocking. "Still playing the savior, brother? Even as your leash tightens?" He pointed at Marco's hands. Claws still glimmered faintly, refusing to retract. "You're already half gone. The curse hasn't died. It's chosen you." Marco's jaw clenched. His body shook under the pull of the blood moon. But he stood tall, shielding Elena with his battered frame. Elena's pulse pounded. "If the curse lives, then what was that?" she demanded, pointing toward the shattered altar. Lucian's smile sharpened. "That was the first wolf's soul, freed. And now it seeks a new vessel, a perfect vessel." His gaze slid over her, cold and hungry. "You..." The ground trembled again, this time not from below but from the sky itself. The blood moon pulsed, beating like a living heart, and from its glow spilled threads of crimson light that snaked downward, reaching for Elena. Her breath caught. Heat seared her skin where the tendrils touched, a fire burrowing beneath her flesh. Marco lunged, slashing the air with golden claws. The threads recoiled, but not for long. They returned stronger, faster, weaving around Elena's arms, her throat, binding her in a web of burning light. She screamed, collapsing to her knees. The silver locket blazed white-hot against her chest, but even its glow dimmed under the moon's hunger. Lucian raised his arms, his shadows mingling with the red glow. "Yes, become what you were meant to be. The wolf reborn, the curse incarnate." Marco roared, fully shifting now, the golden fire consuming him. His wolf form burst forth, larger, brighter, fiercer than ever, eyes blazing against the blood moon. He hurled himself at Lucian, their clash shaking the ruins like an earthquake. Fangs met shadows, claws met steel. They tore at each other with the fury of centuries. Elena struggled against the bindings, her skin blistering under the moonlight. Her mind screamed, "Not again." Not as their pawn, the locket pulsed once more, faint but alive. She clutched it, whispering through clenched teeth. "If I broke you once, I'll break you again." She focused, not on Marco, not on Lucian, but on herself, on the waitress who had once spilled coffee, on the daughter who had prayed beside her mother's bedside, on the woman who had stood in this mansion's shadow and refused to bow. Her blood answered. The bindings faltered. Lucian's head snapped toward her, fury in his pale eyes. No, but it was too late. Elena rose, her body glowing with silver fire, her voice carrying over the battlefield. "I am not your vessel. I am not your curse. I am my own." The threads of the blood moon shattered around her, bursting into sparks. The shockwave flung Lucian back, slamming him into the ruined wall. Marco, in wolf form, froze, golden eyes wide as he beheld her. Elena stood radiant in the moonlight, the locket burning like a star against her chest. For the first time, she wasn't the hunted or the protected. She was the weapon. Lucian dragged himself up, blood on his lips, rage twisting his face. "Then prove it," he spat. "Face me, end this, if you can." The blood moon pulsed again, its crimson glow flooding the battlefield. Shadows writhed, flames surged, and the air thickened with destiny. Elena stepped forward, silver fire dancing along her arms. Marco growled low, ready to strike. The final battle had begun. The ruins of the mansion became a battlefield of gods and monsters. Crimson moonlight poured down in torrents, mixing with the silver blaze that wrapped around Elena. Every stone, every shattered column, seemed to tremble beneath the weight of what was about to unfold. Lucian rose from the rubble, his once immaculate face twisted with fury and desperation. His shadows surged like tidal waves, black and venomous. "You think you can end me, girl? I am the bloodline. I am the curse itself." Elena's voice rang out, steady, unyielding. "You're nothing but fear wrapped in chains. Tonight, I end both." Marco, in his towering wolf form, padded forward to her side, golden fire coursing through his fur. His growl shook the air. He didn't speak, he didn't have to. His presence was a vow. He would fight with her, or die beside her. Lucian roared, unleashing his power. Shadows swarmed like serpents, striking from all directions. The blood moon pulsed, feeding his strength. Elena lifted her hands, silver fire bursting outward in a shield of light. The shadows shattered against it like waves against cliffs. Marco leapt through the storm, slamming into Lucian with bone-cracking force. The ground split. The sky screamed. The brothers tore into each other, fangs against claws, light against shadow. Elena joined the storm, every strike of her silver fire burning through the darkness. Lucian staggered under their combined fury, but still he laughed, blood staining his teeth. "Kill me, and the curse will devour you both. It's bound to this moon. You can't destroy what feeds the sky." Elena's eyes burned brighter. She glanced at the locket, then at the moon. And then the truth struck her. The curse wasn't inside Lucian anymore. It wasn't in Marco. It wasn't even in her. It was in the blood moon itself. Her breath hitched. "The moon," Marco snarled, forcing Lucian back for a heartbeat. "Elena, what are you thinking?" She lifted the locket high. "We don't fight him. We end the source." Lucian's pale face contorted with terror for the first time. "No, you wouldn't dare." But she already had. Pouring everything she had left into the locket, Elena aimed its silver blaze at the sky. The chain seared against her skin, fusing into her palm. But she held it steady. The light shot upward, piercing the night. Striking the crimson heart of the blood moon, the sky exploded. The moon wailed. Yes, wailed. A sound of centuries of rage and sorrow tearing free. Cracks split across its surface, spilling rivers of silver flame. The crimson light faltered, dimmed, died. The curse screamed as it unraveled, its tendrils ripping away from Lucian, from Marco, from Elena herself. Lucian staggered, his shadows tearing apart, his body crumbling under the force. No, it was mine. He reached for the sky as if he could grasp the moonlight, but it slipped through his fingers. His final scream was swallowed by the blaze as he disintegrated into ash. Marco collapsed, his wolf form unraveling into a man once more. Golden fire flickered out, leaving only exhaustion in his trembling body. Elena fell to her knees, the locket shattering in her hand. Nothing more than silver dust now. Silence followed. Heavy. Absolute. The sky cleared, revealing a pale, peaceful moon. No longer red, no longer cursed. Marco crawled to her side, his hand closing around hers. His voice was hoarse, broken, but alive. "You did it." Elena's lips curved, faint but sure. "No, we did." And for the first time in centuries, the night belonged to no curse, no beast, no master. Only to them, the storm has passed. The curse has ended, and the girl who once spilled coffee on a stranger's suit now stands as the woman who defied fate itself. But every ending is only the start of another story. Will Elena and Marco's fragile bond survive without the shadow of the curse? Or will freedom bring new trials, new enemies, new heartbreaks? Only time will tell. If you've been swept away by this story, make sure to hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next chapter of love, danger, and destiny. Because sometimes, the most forbidden stories are the ones that burn the brightest.